Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we'll talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Rook, as well as the latest episode of Nosferatu. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you don't want to hear what I say about this week's episode of The Rook, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Nosferatu. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Rook. A lot of interesting things. We get a lot of background and kind of understand a little bit more about this world. In particular, people with abilities are known as EVAs, extreme variant abilities. Actually, we even got more insight into what exactly Mythony can do. Her ability is a transdermal neural transmission. Essentially, she kind of sends electricity through your skin. And that's something that ends up kind of being why they're not really suspecting her for what went down at the bridge and the bank, because her ability, because I thought it was kind of interesting, because I noticed it even more so this time, because I was like, it almost seemed like, at first I wasn't sure if her hands were already like that, but like obviously we got a little recap of like when her ability first awakened in 2004. It makes you wonder what it is exactly that triggers these abilities in people. Is it like, certain trauma? Does something just kind of get knocked loose? Is it like a mutation? Maybe, like, we don't really know. I mean, it's like the way Linda describes it, it's like the furthest like reaches of like the human body or whatever are able to kind of commit these abilities. In fact, only like 1/100% of people in the world have these abilities. So it's like a very minuscule amount of people have this power. So powers in general. So it's very interesting. But basically, because I noticed it, like, the point I was making was like her hands look a little burnt. So I guess it's like she basically transfers kind of electricity from herself to the person. Like I said, transdermal, I mean, I had to look it up to make sure, because I figured transdermal meant like through the skin, and that's what it is, kind of to absorb something through your skin. So her electricity goes to the top of your skin and gets absorbed into your body like that. But that's the thing, like, everything that's happened has been on a very internal level, like to the point that Emmy, she was talking about the fact of the matter is it almost looks like everybody's from a different crime scene, because they literally all died from different things. You would think it would affect them all the same way, but maybe it was kind of just one at a time. I mean, like, the fact is that whatever it is, whatever Mythony potentially did, it just shattered everything and just hit everyone all at once. But I think it would affect them all literally multiple different ways, and she would do that subconsciously potentially, because let's not forget, two of the people she accidentally killed after losing her memory. She was just defending herself, but still, you get what I'm trying to say? It's so fascinating. But because I guess typically maybe when she uses her ability, because it's transdermal, it usually leaves a mark on the outside. So the fact is that there's nothing but internal damage wouldn't point anyone to her ability. In fact, people probably be like, oh yeah, that's interesting. The cause of death, kind of similar to your ability, but it's completely on the outside. So, I mean, it's all on the inside, so we know it's totally not yours. Because even Linda's like, what she displayed at that bridge potentially is nothing Mythony has ever done before. So that begs the question, like, why? Like, was this in fact Mythony? Did someone else step in to protect her? Like, did something trigger to make her, because the thing is, later on Linda talks about the whole pills that she takes. Obviously that was more Mythony's decision. Well, Mythony's not here to really defend herself to be whether or not those pills are really her solution, or whether that was really Linda's suggestion and she kind of went along with it. I don't know. Maybe there's more to that, but we'll see. But maybe her pills, she had been off her pills for a while, so it's just like she kind of got her control, like, I don't know, because obviously, like, even going back to 2004, even that moment, it showed that she wasn't that dangerous as what she did on her bridge. I mean, to be fair, it seems like she might have done something to her dad when she fell off the roof and her powers kind of activated. You saw, like, potentially her dad die, maybe, or at the very least something happened, and her mom kind of looked mortified at the whole situation. But once again, we only got a little context to that, so there's a lot more to that we don't know about. Obviously, Linda's putting Mythony through some trials to be like, okay, so like, showing her stuff to see if it triggers anything. What's also interesting is Linda doesn't show her everything, because she actually goes, let me see some of the pictures you're going to show her. Yes, no. It seems like the very more personal stuff to her, I guess everything family related, don't show her those pictures, just because I guess there's a lot of bad blood and bad history to that, something traumatic. But the sad thing is, Mythony wouldn't remember it. Her doctor's saying, like, which is interesting, like, we're going as far as like letting, I guess they're patient confidentiality and doctor-patient confidentiality, so I guess it's like they don't have to worry about that type of stuff. But what's interesting though is like they're like under the impression like what's happened to Miffany is short term, but it's like Miffany before losing her memories was so certain what was going to happen to her was going to be permanent, that there was no going to be reversing it. So, they're suggesting like, oh, you have dissociative amnesia, it's only going to last like hours, maybe weeks, maybe months, but I don't know if that's the case. Like I said, like the first episode makes it seem like she would never get her memories back. It seems like, because obviously she's not telling Linda everything, because it's like, oh yeah, like, because she kind of keeps Linda at a distance, because it's like, I can't even trust you. Literally someone that's a part of the Chicay is the reason why I lost my memories in the first place. Somebody betrayed me and I don't know who it is. Don't know who to trust. So she has to be careful, It makes it seem like Linda might have her best interests at heart. But once again, who do you trust? Can you really even trust her? The fact is, she was like, okay, if you want, I'll take you to this farm. Take this as an opportunity to reinvent yourself. And, I'll get the Gestalt to take you there. But it's like, you told me basically shit would kind of like come crumbling down if I miss work. And she's like, well, whatever the case may be, I'll take the brunt of it. But it's like, for Miffany, it's like, no, I need to find out the truth. Because she looks at herself as like a monster, because she's looking at all these bodies like, who cares whatever the circumstances may be. The fact is to know that she potentially could have been responsible for what happened to these 10 people. 8 at the very least, she knows she's responsible for what happened to the people at the bank. So it's like, she looks at herself like a monster. But it's like, Linda's like, no, you're just a capable woman, because these people were vultures. They were literally... Because EVAs, and I figured as much. There's like, I was kind of in the wrong lane. I was thinking like, okay, there was a bounty on her head or something like that. It's more so like this is a trafficking. They get, EVAs get, traded, and someone was trying to go after her. It's like, why? I guess specifically maybe because of her ability. I guess like the more powerful an ability is, the more, Cause we don't know how many of the variants like have. I mean, amongst the one we've been introduced to, because obviously there's the Gestalt, there's Miffany, there's Monica, and then there's Conrad, and obviously they have 4 different abilities. But who knows how many are repeats amongst other variants, or whether literally every variant has a completely different ability, which could be potentially the truth in that regard. But it'd be interesting that maybe if there were similar abilities, the more rare an ability is, the more valuable it is, or at the very least the applications of that ability, because they get used for their power. So that's probably more likely to like selling point for a lot of different variants. It's like, oh, what this ability is capable of doing, so kind of getting back to Miffany's thing is actually pretty impressive, because like the person at the scene was like, literally what went down at the bridge was enough power and lightning to literally turn some of the soil into glass. And the fact of the matter is, enough power generated, it could literally power a small city, which is like, Jesus, that's pretty impressive. We also kind of got a little more insight into the Gestalt, like seeing how they apply themselves, kind of like trying to get information from that Russian contact that they have, utilizing their power like that, being like, okay, like, it kind of works very nicely for espionage. So it was kind of interesting, because obviously they get led down their path. I even love Monica and Ingrid, kind of on the same note, but obviously a separate note. Ingrid kind of getting pissed at Monica, because Monica doesn't like the fact that she's not on the front lines of this investigation. It's like, I'm here to support, kind of basically shitting on what Ingrid and her team do, like with the support and everything. It's like, oh yeah, we deal with visas and stuff like that. Like, for example, getting an emergency visa ready for someone who literally, getting it ready within like an hour of someone arriving here, even though they were literally when this person literally didn't tell anyone. And Monica's like, were you talking about me? And it's like, yes. It's kind of like you kind of did a shitty thing, and at the same time you shit on what Ingrid does. But she's like, oh, I know what you're doing. And she's like, okay, I'll help you out if you basically don't patronize me and try to be like, oh, what you do is so. And Monica's like, yeah, sure, I won't do that anymore. Obviously, everything related to this whole market situation, she's trying to keep under wraps. Now, I wonder, is it just because of her personal relationship with Marcus, she just wants to be the first one to kind of dive into everything? because obviously it turns out like she knows that Marcus disappeared like 2 years ago on a mission, and no one knew if he was still alive until this moment, which is interesting considering the fact it's no longer alive. But I digress. Nevertheless, but what's interesting is like Monica wasn't expecting to run into the Gestalt at the where the Vultures. Basically, it seemed like they all lived in the same place. They literally had the place wrapped up, almost kind of like a murder room, kind of like some Dexter level stuff. But I guess it's more so when they do their thing, they don't leave any evidence or DNA behind. So it's more of a precaution in that regard, I'm assuming. But Monica found some stuff there related to Marcus, but she didn't tell the Gestalt. It's like, okay, so she's keeping secrets. Then there's everything with Conrad. He meets with a guy from the Legat. Basically, I like kind of that back and forth, because Legat's trying to be like, oh, we don't know anything about what went down. It's like, you literally own the bank. It's like, we're invested in it. It's like, no, you own that bank where things went down, so you know a lot more. Like, you know why the CCTV would just happen to not be off at that time. It's like, your organization, the particular person who leads it, Lorik, he's got his hands in a lot of pies, in the sense of like, oh yeah, like he handles a lot of like, drug trading and stuff like that. The Chicay and the Legat have a very mutual enough relationship, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of government people tend to look the other way from what they do, but it's like you also traffic people and stuff, like in particular EVAs, and for him it's like it pisses him off, because it's like the fact of the matter is the Chicay isn't in this for the money, we're in this for the power, and you just tested that power by like lying to my face, because I know you guys are involved in some shape or form. Conrad does circle back around and get the information. It is kind of neat to see his power. It's not like he has to like use his hands or anything. It is 100% with his mind, just suck the air right out of you, knock you out. Home dude, the last dude, kind of got it the roughest, because it's like you got 40 seconds until your lungs start to blister. It's like, Jesus, he's coughing up blood, potentially going to start choking on it too. But it was a situation of like, he admits that the person they were after was Mythony. I was actually surprised. I was like, oh wow, now Conrad knows. And then when Linda contacts him about like, oh, you met with Legat, you found that information, he's like, no. I'm like, why the hell are you keeping that secret from Linda? And it's not, what surprised me even more is he ended up telling the Home Secretary. I'm like, so why would you tell her but not Linda? But then it's like, he brings up a good point. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That must be why he didn't tell Linda, because it's like, literally, if anyone was going to know about this, it would be Linda, because it's someone on our team, sure, but it's also someone she cares about a lot, especially if it's something connected to Mythony. You amongst anyone would know. So it's like, if you didn't, like, this can't be something you couldn't have possibly known. So if it is something you potentially knew, why didn't you tell the rest of us? So I guess that's why, I guess he trusts the Home Secretary a lot more than he does Linda. Which I'm curious, is he going to go to Mythony about this? Like, how much of like her like whole not having her memories thing, it's like, is that going to stay between her and Linda, or is everyone else going to eventually find out the truth? Who knows? It's going to be interesting to see what Conrad potentially does in the next episode with this information. Because Mythony even said it. It's like, yeah, be careful around Conrad. He likes you, but still be careful. So it's like, I guess, like, once you become potentially a liability in some shape or form, maybe he'd be quick to kind of take action, but on a day-to-day basis, he likes her enough to not do it. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where that ends up going. Obviously, there's a complicated situation with the Gestalt, because, like, yeah, for her, it's like, oh, you just came to the crime scene to see me, right? And it's like, if you did, maybe we did just write this whole thing off too quickly. But obviously, Mythony's got to be like, yeah, I was drunk. Yeah, I barely remember. He's like, yeah, you just pretend like it didn't happen. Because for her, it didn't, because she doesn't remember, And, sadly, that hurts to the Gestalt a lot. Just kind of makes them feel a little shitty, because they kind of like Mythony, and I think, once again, she has to hide the fact that she no longer has her memory and everything, so that's a whole complicated thing, which later on, one of them drives her home, and it's like, he's pissed not just because of, like, the crime scene situation, or, the discussion that happened earlier, or, or what happened between them. He was like, it's more of a professional thing. Like, you compromise everything by you not doing your job. And Linda, she's got you wrapped up in her skirt, just like the Bristol situation. It's like, what is that supposed to mean? You know what that means. It's like, no, she literally doesn't know what that means. So it's like, I guess it's a thing of like Linda covers for her when she kind of falters in certain regards, because Linda looks after her and takes care of her. So that's going to complicate things too, because they don't realize, like, oh, I don't, maybe they'd be a little more sympathetic if they understood, like, oh, I literally don't remember, our time together because I don't remember anything. To the point, she's obviously once again leaving notes for herself everywhere. She found one in her car, which she refers to as Alice. She also found a tire full of money, so I guess that's for any future needs that she has. But it's like, why do you have that money stashed away in a tire? I guess that's money she doesn't want anyone to know. I guess that was kind of like her rainy day fund, kind of just like when shit gets real, like you have that money. Even to the point if she was just kind of like, I'm desperately, like before this, it's like before the note in her car, I guess that might have been right before the incident, because that's where she parked the car and left it. So I'm assuming for her, it's like she doesn't know when it's going to go down, but she gets it feeling like it's soon enough. So it's like, before I've been so organized with all the notes and just messages, and now it's like, here I am so desperate, at the very end potentially. But once again, she didn't know it was the end at that point, the note she left in Alice. So bad enough to, like, once again, the whole Linda situation of, like, you do have her constantly spying on you, keeping an eye on you. It's like, is that out of concern, or potentially because you're trying to, I don't know, like I said, maybe Miffany came across something that she didn't realize she came across back then. Like, maybe whatever it is she knew that she didn't realize she knew could be used, could be compromising, so that's why maybe it's just like whoever it was needed to remove her from the situation. And it's like, the question then becomes like, why is her memory wiped? Why is she not dead? Maybe because the person didn't want her dead. It's like, maybe the vulture attack was meant to, like, because they're making it seem like it was a trauma thing. I was under the assumption like it was someone else's ability that led to her not remembering, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe it is trauma. Maybe it is something she will get back in a little while. Who knows? I kind of get the feeling like Linda lied when she was like, oh yeah, your parents passed away some time ago, and just like, oh, maybe it's a good thing you kind of don't remember, which is kind of a shitty thing to say to someone who literally knows nothing about themselves. But it's like, once again, the whole conversation of reinventing yourself. She goes to the Blades because, like, she's struggling with everything. She's drinking because she's trying to deal with the factors of, like, man, I'm a monster, what I did to these bodies. But then, she finds the Blades, but there's a note to be like, hey, this brought me comfort, but it was only a temporary fix, the physical pain. You remember the scars on her leg and everything from her cutting herself. And so, I don't know if I even brought that up last episode about that situation. But it's like, you don't have to go down this route. But the moment you do, it's going to be down that road. But if you decide to take those steps forward, cool. But if you don't, you're going to be taking 1,000 steps back. Just because once she starts, there's not going to be any stopping it. But you can find another, once again, the whole reinventing herself. So it's like, you don't remember the alleviation of pain that way. So you don't have that sensation, that trigger. So for you, it's like, you cannot do this and be fine and just find some other avenue, or at the very least, handle things differently than I do. Because once you start down that path, there's no going back, essentially. So I just thought that was kind of, an interesting side effect of, like, losing her memory, of being like, yeah, and like, some of your more sad ways of alleviating pain, that proclivity, not really proclivity, I don't think would be, like, the right word. Like I said, just that isn't something that's there in your mind anymore, So, I mean, she kind of thought about it because she came across the Blades last episodes and saw the scars on her leg, realizing, like, oh, that was my way of dealing with stuff. So, that in itself is interesting. Obviously, Monica ends up finding out, yep, Marcus was neck deep in this stuff because she took one of the things from the crime scene, and it turns out to be kind of a flash drive that leads to a site where they auction off EVAs, and it's like, well, shit, what have you got yourself into? Not unless we end up finding out Marcus is like super deep cover type of situation that even like Monica wasn't even aware of how deep his cover went. But then there's also the whole conversation at the end of like, okay, I'm assuming that was Marcus. Once again, I didn't pay enough attention to the identities. I'm assuming that was Marcus because they make such a point to focus on him. So we see him wake up. So it's like, okay, so is that your ability? Does Monica not know your ability, or you just temporarily taken out of commission? Like, what is your ability specifically? It'd be kind of interesting if we end up finding out that she actually had no idea that he was an EVA, that was kept even from her, that he kept that from her, potentially. That's the only thing I can explain for you literally being dead for that long, and then luckily for him, no one had gotten to his body yet. So it's like, why in that specific moment? Maybe it's like, maybe there's like a a time frame for him regenerating or something. I mean, that might be his ability. Like, he might have taken some internal damage, but this entire time he's been quote unquote dead. He's been slowly regenerating. Maybe it puts himself in like a low heart rate state where it seems like he's dead, but he's piecing himself together on the inside. Thought process that, that's where my mind's at. So I'm very interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Nosferatu. So a lot of interesting things went down in this episode. First and foremost, we kind of look back on Jolene and Charlie's life back in like 56. Turns out they were actually in a relationship. It was a situation of Charlie wanted to actually marry her, have a family and stuff like that. Granted, that was a more twisted version of it because this was him talking about the whole aspect of obviously wanting Jolene to be the mother to the children in Christmas Land. I think I forgot to bring that up last episode because I think he was even referring to Vic potentially as playing that role of a mother to the kids in Christmas Land. But whatever the case may be, obviously Jolene wasn't down with it because she's like, the fact is you haven't taken me to Christmas Land is because, like, if she knows that if I go there, I'm going to see what that place is like, all those children you take, and the fact of the matter is he's not the man that she fell in love with anymore, because obviously he's been like, oh, I've been driving, I've been doing this, but for her it's like, I know you've been lying because the past couple months you haven't been driving. I guess he's just been going more and more into the whole kidnapping kids things. Once again, we haven't really dived into it, but once again, it does seem like it stems from his own personal childhood, his upbringing, that it's like, oh, I couldn't be saved, but I'm going to save all these other kids. Like, he just, something snapped in him, but more so than I guess it's like something that was buried deep down inside of him, but the moment he became a super creative, it changed all. Strong creative, I keep saying super, I mean strong. Jeez, I don't know why that got stuck in my head like that. Strong creative. Nevertheless, moving on, even to the point he literally tried to run her down, but she ended up getting away. I was like, oh, is that what ends up happening to her? But it's like, no, she ended up getting away on her skates. It's interesting. I was like, okay, she seems like she's moving in. Is she going to just take off? And I was like, okay, because she's supposed to move like the wind. So I was like, okay, so she's just going to pew, like take off like the Flash. But then she kind of disappears. So I was like, okay, so what is her power exactly? Obviously, we get more of a look at that later on. But let's kind of, go back through some other stuff that ends up happening in the episode. Obviously, Vig's got to talk her way around doctors, people examining her, the whole eye situation. And so it's a situation that she's talking to like a therapist or something. The doctor's kind of like, he's trying to understand everything. It's like, oh, who's Charlie Minx? What's this whole situation about? Your family situation, which he kind of gets her talking a little bit about it. And it's actually kind of interesting what he kind of ends up bringing up, the whole thing of like, abusive situation in your home. Because it's like, oh, why do you want to go to college so much? Why do you want to go to college so you can get out of this town? Like, why is being here so bad? And she references like, oh yeah, spend the rest of your life here, have a, like basically that small town life. And it's like, why is that so bad? And it's like, is it because your parents are from here? Like, your parents grew up here, they're from here, aren't they? And it brings up the, is there abuse in the family? Like, your dad, like, she's like, yeah, they fight, it's like, not my mom's like a saint or whatever, she hit me, smacked me around a lot. But then he kind of explains like, yeah, but typically women who are abused, tend to lash out at their kids just because it's just this like cycle of abuse that feeds in itself. So, but obviously she didn't want to talk too much about it because it also, no matter what the circumstances are, she's going to defend her dad, because for her it's like, no, my dad, he never hit me. But, it's like, yeah, but your dad drank and stuff like that. So are you saying that, it's obviously she's not saying it's justifiable, but once again, it's like, her dad is always going to be her hero in her eyes, so it's always going to be hard to kind of remove him from that pedestal, to her mom's detriment, because it's like, you always look at me like I'm the bad guy when your dad's a good, your dad's a good guy. That's always been her mentality. Once again, the last episode kind of shook that in her head about the whole aspect of, well, not last episode, the episode before last, right? So, but nevertheless, it was just kind of an interesting situation, and obviously, I thought was really fascinating is, like, I guess the turn of events that she ends up rooming with Jolene. It's almost like fate kind of brought them together. And obviously she helps Jolene by not making her take her pills. I don't know, there's a lot that seems so interesting about this. Like, it seems a little unethical in certain regards. I mean, I guess it makes sense because she signed the papers and stuff like that. Because that also comes up too. It's like, oh, did someone force you to sign? She's like, she's not trying to get her dad in trouble because she knows it's just going to cause more issues. It's like, no, I signed it on my own for you. I'm 18. I made the decision on my own. I signed the papers. Let's leave it at that. But also, like, they kept threatening her. It's like, he's like, you know, the fact of the matter is, you don't comply, I can kind of keep you here 90 more days. It's like, I guess it makes sense, because if you feel like someone's potentially a threat to themselves or someone else, it makes sense. But even like the other lady that was giving Jolene her meds, it's like, oh, like, fact of the matter is, you know, not taking your meds that you were prescribed, even though it was never brought up before, if you don't take them, it extends your stay. Oh, interfering with someone else's medication cycle will extend your stay. It's like they kept throwing that in her face. But she, you know, like I said, helps out Jolene. And I was actually surprised when Jolene was like, oh, I need my skates. And I'm like, wait, but... And then pulls out the wheelchair. I was like, oh, I thought the whole thing... I was like, okay, so it's going to turn into a thing of like... She's going to help Jolene, but it's not going to work because she's going to be under the impression that that's her bike, her knife. And it turns out it is. She gets, like, I guess now she's got her faculties back. She's in her wheelchair, and, you know, you have Vic pushing her. She builds up enough speed and activates. I'm like, holy crap. And it's so interesting because Vic brings it up because, like, the moment they go into what's known as a dark tunnel, I guess that's her escape. The fact is that once, like, they get there, she's able to walk. I guess because, like, that's her zone. Like, in that zone, she can kind of do whatever she wants to. And so that was kind of interesting. Also, it's like, but yeah, because I thought about that. I was like, but I thought your skates were your bike. I mean, your knife. I keep saying bike. But it's like, yeah, apparently strong creatives can have more than one knife, which is interesting. That's really fascinating, because the moment Charlie took her skates, I guess they were never destroyed. He just kept them, so that power's still there. But I guess it's like it passed on to her wheelchair, like when she was kind of bound to it, because it gave her hope. It kept her moving, so that became her new knife. Which that might be foreshadowing what's going to happen with Vic. Maybe Vic's going to lose her knife, that being her bike. And like I said, we didn't get any instance of that this episode, but maybe next time we'll find out that's the case. But once but the question then becomes like, can you, I mean, technically I guess you can make the argument technically Jolene has two at once, because her skates are still one, but also she has the wheelchair, because obviously, like, he brought her skates, so they're still in existence, and so her wheelchair became one. So it's like they can coexist at the same time. So it's not like if I guess if you lose your knife, you can get another one, but maybe it only happens if there's two at once. So maybe, unbeknownst to her, maybe Vic has another one already out there. Hell, maybe even Charlie does, but for right now, he only has one. Maybe it's only certain strong creatives get to have two, like under certain circumstances. Whatever the case may be, it's fascinating. But her dark tunnel, like, there's tons and tons of missing kids. Like, I mean, to be fair, he's been doing this for decades. Like, even in the 50s, like, he'd already started doing it and stuff like that. So, a long list of kids that have disappeared. And it's like, oh, I've shown you my magic trick, Vic talks about her short away the bridge. And so it's like, what's yours? And Jolene shows it. Essentially, I guess it's like they turn into, like, she turns herself as anyone else that's with her, because both her and Vic's eyes turn white and they pass out. I guess it's like your soul kind of leaves you, turn into ghosts, spirits. But even in that spirit form, you can still interact, because Jolene goes off and haunts. Charlie starts messing with him, blowing in his ear, messing with the radio, messing up the engine. So it's like that thing of, like, if you focus enough, I guess, like, you can interact with certain things. Maybe not necessarily people, but objects. Vic is there. But the thing is, it's interesting because Charlie was like, I can smell you, you whore. But it wasn't Jolene that was near him. It was Vic. So either it's just because he was just assuming it was Jolene, or maybe because it's Jolene's ability, so that's what he was smelling, but just not Vic. So I was like, that's so fascinating. But they go back, and Jolene kind of breaks it down of like, the fact of the matter is, you are on the winning side of this to a certain extent, because it's like, Charlie's afraid of you. He literally came to me asking me about the shorter way. He has not visited me in years, but the fact is he came just to ask about that shows that he's scared of you and your bridge. Because Charlie wants to act like he's not, because that's why he wants her on his side, because she's a threat. I mean, that's why he removed Jolene from the equation, because she was a threat. But Vic seems like she's an even bigger threat. It's like, okay, the Wraith was slowed down by messing it up. Now, what's interesting, though, I find fascinating is like the moment the Wraith was kind of messed with, like he started aging rapidly. So it's like, okay, so I guess once the Wraith is kind of destroyed or takes enough damage, like he kind of reverts back to his true age. I guess the Wraith is technically, maybe potentially the only thing that's really pumping life into him. Maybe he almost kind of, I don't know. It's hard to say whether he has like a full-blown immortality or whether or not it's just like he's an old man, but, you know, luckily, like, his situation is giving him, once again, like, the whole him getting younger thing again, it's like that's a byproduct of him finding a way to balance out what his powers take from him, you know? So it's such a fascinating thing. And it's interesting when she finally breaks down, like, what his actual cost was. The cost for using his abilities was his soul. He paid the steepest price of all. That's compared to like Charlie was not always like this. She knew him before everything, before the Wraith. It's like he was a good, kind, and charming person. But then she saw saw him start to slowly change. But because she loved him, she wasn't willing to see it until that day in 56. That's when everything changed for her, because it's like, I can't look away anymore. I see what you're becoming, you know? But for her, it's like she can't fight Charlie anymore, because it's like she spent so long fighting him and it just didn't work out. She's old now, she's tired of fighting, but she could not rest until she knew that someone else was going to be there to kind of stick up the fight. And so the whole thing with her in the dark tunnel, I'm wondering, is that supposed to be representative, because her eyes go white, so I'm wondering, is that her spirit leaving to kind of venture out in the world? It's like, I'm going to stay a spirit forever and just leave this body behind and never come back. Is that what that's supposed to kind of represent? Or is it just kind of like her life finally fading away? Like I said, like the whole Charlie thing is the only thing that kind of kept her holding on, but knowing that Vic was here means she can finally let go. So, but that's what I'm thinking, considering the fact that her eyes go white inside of the dark tunnel too. So does beg the question that makes you wonder, how did Vic get back? I guess all she had to do, like, maybe your abilities are still tied to your bike and your body, so the moment she put, you know, I was wondering if that's whether they were going to show that or not, because I would think like, oh, that'd be a little twisted and morbid, but I think it's like moving at enough speed, she was able to kind of get out of the dark tunnel. Maybe. I guess that's one of the things of like, don't worry about it. She found a way out. And so she found an ally in this situation, but ended up losing the ally just that quickly. And I think it's so fascinating, because it's also like, tell the doctors whatever it is they need to hear. Don't take the pills, because all that's going to do is mess with your mind. You need your mind and your knife, your bike. All that needs to be sharp, so that when you go up against Charlie, you're able to destroy the Wraith. You destroy the Wraith, you can't save Haley and all the other kids that were kidnapped, but you can save the next one that might be on his list and stop him once and for all. So, and you have Vic going back and talking to her doctor, and she does a very great job of like shifting everything to be like, you know what, you're 100% right. Everything I was saying, it was just something I created in my mind, because it's like, oh, I wanted some adversary this Charlie makes to be someone I could, you know, ride on my bike and save the day. And, you know, because I feel like, you know, basically saying like she was trying to escape her own reality, a reality where Haley's gone, Maggie got hit. The fact is that, you know, a reality where I can't do anything to save people, but that world I created, you know, that Christmas land situation and all that, it's like, no, that lets me feel in control. And that's also something Jolene talked about too, like no other strong creative other than Charlie has ever gone to Christmas land. And obviously she's like, the only other way to get in would be by the trunk, and it's like, you don't want to go in through that way. But the fact of the matter is, once again, I didn't talk about it, like I talked about it a little bit, but it is kind of crazy when you look at the scale of how many children, like I don't know why, just I kind of forget the fact is they were like, right, he's been doing this for decades. So there's probably like time in between, but probably not. Like all those missing children posters, like they're gone and those kids are never coming back. Like I guess once you belong to Christmas land, you're going forever. I mean, maybe that's what it is that Charlie's feeding on, their souls, because when they're becoming those monsters, like maybe his whole Inscape situation takes from them what it takes from him as a price. It takes their soul, but when he takes their souls, it kind of makes him young again. Hence why, like, the moment the engine was messed with, the Wraith kind of channels that energy and makes him young again. And I guess now that the engine got messed up, it kind of cut that line that's, you know, driving all that vitality towards him. That's a thought I have, but the doctor is talking about the fact is that Vic needs to find a different place to live, and she also needs to take her medicine, because it's like, he's like, she says it again, like, my dad doesn't hit me. It's like, yes, but I'm here to protect you, not just from physical violence, but also emotional stuff, saying that, basically her dad kind of emotionally hurts her, which is also interesting because she talks to her mom about like her dad, but it's like no one knows where he is because he's not at Tiffany's. The only one that's there is Tiffany. So it's like, where is he? Where did he go? Did he feel bad about what he was doing? So I mean, you had her mom suggesting that maybe he was in a bar or something. So that begs the question too. Maybe he's off kind of drowning his sorrows. So when this is all said and done, Vic is able to kind of get released. It seems like she was only locked up for 3 days. She goes to see Maggie, who Maggie went through a whole bunch of surgeries and stuff, and it looks like she's doing better, but Maggie's kind of broken in the sense of like her spirit, because like she was all for this battle, but she's walking away now. And it's so interesting to see the flip side of everything, because Maggie was all about taking down Charlie, and Vic was kind of reluctant. Obviously, she got a little more into it after like the whole Haley situation, but now it's like they're completely done a 180. Both Vic's like, no, we got to do this, but Maggie's like, no, I dragged you into something I shouldn't have gotten involved in, and I shouldn't have gotten you involved in. The fact of the matter is, the moment the wraith hit her, she saw what Danny had become. It did that to kind of torture her, I guess, a little bit. Just like the moment she touched the wraith, it knew everything about her. So maybe the whole point was to kind of break her spirit. And it's like, you've seen the same thing about Haley, haven't you? But for Maggie, it's like their kids, they're all going. There's no saving them. But it's like, we have to stop Charlie. It's like, Maggie's like, I'm done. I'm going to go back home. Take your pills, Vic. Go to college. Just basically live your life and just forget this all happened. To the point that Maggie actually throws her Scrabble bag away. I'm thinking it's not going to be that easy. Even when she goes back home, I think what happens is her bag is going to magically pop up. Like, I think it's not going to be that easy to get rid of it. It's kind of like, this is your path. This is the path you're supposed to go down. Like, destiny won't kind of let you walk away from it that easily. Maybe next time we see Vic potentially using her bridge might take her to Maggie to be like, yo, like, trying to talk her out of this whole situation. Because Vic, she's back home with her mom. She doesn't take the pills. She dumps them out because she's ready to fight. Like I said, it's so interesting to see kind of like the shoe on the other foot. Like I said, just like seeing them kind of so opposite of who they were beforehand, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Vic handles the situation going forth. Like, how will she go about destroying that car, the car that can move and act upon on its own? Like, how do you fight something like that? Like, how do you track it down? Like, how do you go about it? Because also I guess if she pushes herself enough, could her bridge potentially take her to Christmas Lane? I mean, can she even save those kids? What about the kids that have been there forever? Like, what happens to them? Or what if you end up destroying the wraith and stuff like that? Does that mean Christmas Lane gets destroyed and everyone there with it? Like, is it too late to save those kids, or can they be saved? A lot of those questions need to be asked, and I'm so curious to see where ultimately all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.